Welcome to 3 Minute Warning, a Canadian Football League podcast. We're a proud member of All Sports, All Plays Network. My name is Bill Beer at PigskinPunk13 on Twitter. And joining me tonight, Dallas Bergen at CFL Fans Toronto on Twitter. And as always, all the CFL games are available on ESPN Plus in the United States and TSN in Canada. Welcome to episode 6 of 3 Minute Warning. How's it going, Dallas?
Hey, Bill, good to see you. I'm doing all right. Excited to talk some CFL.
Absolutely. So we had a little news this week. As actually we had some big news in different areas, and the first newsworthy topic that we have was Kenny Lawler. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers' big wide receiver had a DUI a few days ago, and it doesn't look like he's going to be playing this week.
Yeah, that's some sad news from hero to zero a little bit this week, with coming off a 200-plus yard game, and then this really unfortunate news that Kenny Lawler was caught driving under the influence or driving while impaired. It's just, you never like to see anything like that. I really think the Winnipeg Blue Bombers did a great job getting out ahead of this one, though. They took action right away, suspended him for this week's game, and you just never like to see anything like that. These are role models. And driving while impaired is an unacceptable offense. So I think the Blue Bombers did a good job. So the statement from them read, Kenny informed the team today of his arrest for operating a motor vehicle while impaired early this morning. Upon further investigation, the club has suspended Kenny for Friday's game and has reported the incident to the league office. We take this incident very seriously and have spoken at length with Kenny throughout the day. Kenny recognizes the seriousness of the situation and that this type of behavior is unacceptable and inexcusable. He has agreed to seek assistance as it relates to alcohol abuse and has cooperated fully with police on the matter. So they're not mincing words there. They're handling this seriously as it should be. And that'll hurt the team on the field. But as far as Kenny Lawler goes, I hope he learns from this lesson. Driving while impaired obviously puts people in danger and is not something that we ever want to see. And at the same time, character can be rehabilitated. I think we need to understand that these players and stars are people. People make mistakes. They are fallible, and so we'll look forward to Kenny bringing his best following this incident.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that surprised me a little bit was how quick they were to hand out that suspension. Is that something that has happened in the past? They hand those suspension, because I'm used to watching the NFL, and this thing has to drag out for months and months and months before any suspension or punishment is given out. And it was nice to see that there was something immediate for something like this, which I think it needs to be. And the NFL should, look towards the CFL and adopt some of these practices, because I think it's important to show, as you said, the role models for kids and teenagers and even adults. They're role models, and they need to be better than the rest. So
that's right. The very first thing I wondered was who suspended him, and so I went to see that it was the Winnipeg Blue Bombers taking swift action. They're running a class organization where there is accountability. They could have appealed or swept this under the rug or anything else, especially coming off that huge game. But the Bombers took it head on, and I really credit them for their character and the way that they've handled this. It's hard to like them when they're so hard to beat, but things are greater than football, and I think this was a real class move by the organization.
Absolutely. I agree with that totally. So our next bit of news here is really unfortunate, and if you watched the game last Friday night, you saw Lucky Whitehead was injured, and he's going to miss, I believe it was 3 to 6 weeks with a broken hand. And that's a big loss because he was leading the league in receiving, and he was a special talent this year, showcasing his skills. And it's a big loss for BC, and it's a big loss for the CFL.
You're totally right. That's really well said. And not just, leading the league in receiving. I felt a second following his injury and with that game for Kenny Lawler. But, Lucky Whitehead emerged as a star and as a recognizable star that people were chatting about, watching interviews about, we're right on the pulse of. And like you said, that's so good for the league when we really get to know these players. It was heartbreaking to hear that news, and it sounded like Lucky's surgery has been postponed as well, although hopefully that got sorted out. But yesterday he said he was on his way for surgery, which, as you said, is a recovery time of 3 to 6 weeks. But then a follow-up tweet said it had been postponed. So I think timing is of the essence, given the distance to the playoffs where we're at. The healing of a broken hand is right on the cusp there, and certainly the BC Lions want to see him back for the playoffs. But wishing him a great recovery and good health as well. It's sad to see.
Yes,
something
it
like
is.
that.
Yep, absolutely. So, in my final bit of news that we have
give us some
here,
good news. Those are a couple of downers.
Okay,
man.
yeah. Started with the downers. Some good news here is your Riders, your Saskatchewan Roughriders, signed wide receiver Duke Williams. And if you're not familiar with Duke Williams, he started in the CFL 2017 with Edmonton, and 2018. He led the CFL in receiving. He had 88 catches, 1,579 yards, and 11 touchdowns. And then he decided to take his skills to the NFL, and he went and played a backup role with the Buffalo Bills for a few seasons. And he decided to head back to Canada, and he signed with the Roughriders. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's the good news. Well, that's pretty exciting, and it's even more exciting given the Riders' loss this week and Cody Fajardo's real frustration at his receiving core. I mean, he was as candid about that as you could imagine. He walked off the field as the game ended, and had a little bit of time to calm down before he did his post-game presser, and we've never seen this side of Cody Fajardo. Sorry to go to Cody rather than talk about Duke, but I think it's all so interconnected, where Cody Fajardo was really disappointed in his receivers and that they are not bringing down the 50-50 ball. Cody Fajardo's talked about the 50-50 ball since he's come to Saskatchewan, and has always given credit and praise to his receivers. And this was the first time that we saw this side of his character, where Cody Fajardo is pissed. I mean, he is really, really upset. And so for this timing, and a player that is familiar with Jason Moss, who had played under him as a head coach with the Edmonton Elks, this is just what Cody Fajardo and the Saskatchewan Roughriders need when they've had so much trouble connecting on that long ball, to have a deep threat like that who stretches the field. Again, familiar with the offense, so hopefully he will I'm pretty sure he'll be pressed into service as soon as possible. And hopefully that makes a difference there, because that long passing game has been a real shortcoming of the Riders. But for our listeners, if you're an Auburn fan, you might want to watch Duke Williams and the Saskatchewan Roughriders, because Nick Marshall and Ricardo Lewis, all teammates at Auburn. So the Saskatchewan Roughriders are the Auburn fans team in the CFL. But what an exciting signing to have Duke Williams, and it held in suspense for a day or two. Everybody was talking and wondering where he was going to end up. Would it be, Ottawa or Calgary or Saskatchewan or Toronto? And
So was this a signing that he could? I'm just asking this question because I'm not super familiar with the free agent processes. I know they have to have negotiation lists and things like that. So what goes into somebody, that previously played in the CFL and is a free agent and is coming back to sign with a team?
yeah, those players can't be on a list. So they are de facto free agents. They have the
Okay.
opportunity to sign with any team unless they were going to the NFL while on the final window of their contract, where then they would remain the property of the previous team. But
Okay.
because we are 2 seasons removed from a CFL season, Duke was a free agent. So I'm sure he was paid a pretty penny by the Roughriders, and we'll see if that pays off.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. That's for sure. So.
Mhm.
So that's all the news, the big news that I had for this week. We're going to go ahead and we're going to head to our week 9 results here. And the first game that we had was the Friday Nighter. And it was a game I was really looking forward to. It was the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at the BC Lions. And Winnipeg had been playing pretty great of late. Only one loss. And we had some high hopes for BC. We thought this could be a game, and we had the unfortunate injury there early on to Lucky Whitehead, and Winnipeg just kept on chugging. It's disappointing. BC hasn't been able to run the ball much this season. In this game, their leading rusher, unfortunately, was Mike Reilly with 9 yards. That's not going to get it done in the CFL. Not when your quarterback is your leading rusher and you have under 10 yards rushing. The interesting thing about this game that, with Lucky getting injured, he came back into this game. And I don't know if they decided to use him as a decoy or what it was, but he couldn't catch the ball at all. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, my personal speculation, he had family up at the game, maybe for the first time, and he might have just said, "I really want to go. I want to go in. I want to play." And coaches, I mean, medical staff will often sit a
Mhm.
player down and say, "No." We saw some of this with Verdon Adams in the game this week as well. And at the same time, coaches will often defer to the player and say, "Are you sure you can go?" So that may have been some of it. I know the BC Lions wouldn't want to risk further injury, and maybe at that point they hadn't confirmed that it was indeed broken. But I
Right.
imagine that Lucky wanted to be in the game and put on a show. But who knows?
I truly have never seen that where somebody who was injured, a receiver, couldn't catch the ball or was one-handed and I guess there have been some games in the past, like NFL games I remember that there's been decoys, but nothing where they were injured and they come back in the game. So I found that quite interesting.
It was
Do you think they have somebody on this
inspiration.
roster to replace Lucky Whitehead that can step in his role and at least be able to be productive?
Well, be productive and replace are 2
Right, two
different
different
things,
things.
but, I mean, Lucky Whitehead appears to be irreplaceable. I mean, he's had a better season than Bryant Burnham, which is absolutely astounding
Hmm.
what Lucky Whitehead has done. Those are 2 guys that catch 2 out of 3 balls thrown at them and, can be relied on by Michael Reilly. So for Whitehead to go out, that's really gonna hurt them. I think somebody that could really step up for them is Javon Cottoy. I was looking at his numbers and productivity, and
Hmm.
he hasn't caught a lot, but I think he's produced better than the import receiver Keon Hatcher. And Katoy also has a really high catch rate for targets and is able to stretch the field as well. He's a big target, a kind of ratio breaker, as we sometimes say in CFL. So that might be someone who could step up, and I think it's probably a really great opportunity for him to do so. But I think the
Yeah.
BC Lions are also really anxiously awaiting the return of Lamar Durant, another national Canadian receiver
Mm-hmm.
who's been hurt all season. His return would be a tremendous help, but I don't think you replace Lucky Whitehead either.
Yeah, and they need to jumpstart that running game too. I don't know what the answer to that is. And Mike Reilly got sacked a good bit in this game and had a lot of pressure in this game. And compared to some of the past games, I know 2019 he was pressured all the time. Their offensive line really struggled. I hope they're not going in that direction, but we'll see. We mentioned Kenny Lawler at the beginning of the show and said he had 12 catches, 205 yards, and a touchdown. He had some amazing catches. And you were talking about those 50-50 balls. He is one of those players that was, on the positive side of those 50-50 balls.
Oh, what an incredible performance. He had a couple games where at least fans, maybe even the team, were a little down on him. He had some drops, so wasn't performing really well. And for him to bounce back like this and have a performance like that, I mean, the chemistry between him and Zach Collaros, and Collaros played one of his best
Mhm.
games. I mean, and he's had a lot of great games, a really great quarterback that he is, but really has found his groove, going 28 of 33 on the night for 417 yards, like no interceptions, 2 touchdowns. Zach Collaros was as great as we've ever seen, and coupled with that Winnipeg Blue Bombers defense, I think a lot of questions were answered in this game. I think a lot of us hoped that BC might be able to put up a fight, but your point, Bill, of one-dimensional offense
Mhm.
is well made. I mean, BC didn't even attempt to run the ball, and they've had success against other teams playing an offense that way, but not against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. This team is really, really good.
No, they're really, really good. So, yeah. Um, Again, Andrew Harris had 81 yards, 5.8 yard average. I mean, they're just a powerhouse, and they keep on chugging. So, um, and they're getting better as weeks go by, and you have to think that they're a favorite here, going to be a favorite here in the playoffs. So
Oh,
until
the
somebody
absolutely.
until somebody steps up, I think you have to consider them a favorite. So
Yeah,
so
and to
or
hold Michael Reilly to 177 passing yards, I
yeah,
mean,
this,
I
yeah,
often think holding Reilly to under 300 yards is an accomplishment, let alone 200, when he's going to throw the ball for 40 plus attempts per game. And
yeah, absolutely. And if you're not running the ball, they can just what the saying is, pin their ears back and just go after the quarterback every time. I mean, there's no threat of run or anything like that. So that's right up, Winnipeg's defense alley, because you got some amazing pass rushers there.
yeah, you're right. Totally right. It's just,
So
I can't believe BC didn't take a page from Toronto's playbook, the only team to have beaten
right,
Winnipeg.
and they
And I
ran the
think
ball
there's
well in
lots
that
to
game
learn
when
there.
they yeah when they beat them, they ran the ball well. So
Because
yeah,
the other phrase on the flip side is keep them honest, right?
right,
A balanced
right.
offensive attack that keeps the defense honest, and then Jefferson and Jeffcoat can't pin their ears back and just go for the quarterback.
Nope, not at all. So Sunday afternoon, we had a double header, and our first game was Montreal headed into Hamilton. It was Montreal 23, Hamilton 20. And at the beginning of this game, it was all Hamilton. Montreal struggled a little bit. Vernon Adams actually got hurt and left this game. And when that happened, I'm like, okay, this game, over. I mean, Jeremiah Masoli came back and he looked decent, at least at the beginning of this game. They made some plays. You know, there was a fumble and a touchdown. You know, Sean Thomas Erlington, you know, fumbled as he's going in the end zone, and it was a lucky bounce, and he hopped on it. But then, as the second half started, Vernon Adams came back into this game, and they basically said, you know, in the first half, the announcers were saying, "Yeah, he's done for the game." They were saying he's done for the game, and then he's warming up. It's like, I hope he doesn't injure whatever, you know, it happened to his ankle or whatever. I hope he doesn't injure, but he looked pretty solid. They just wrapped it up, and he went in, and it was an amazing comeback. Amazing. One of the most amazing passes on a third down and a catch on a third down to go ahead in that game. I was watching it on my phone because I was at a family function, and I think I cheered out loud because it was so exciting. And then I got to see my first overtime. I hadn't seen a CFL overtime, and that was pretty cool also. So this was my most entertaining game of the weekend. What did you think?
Yeah, what a stunner of a victory. And you're right. The TSN said that Vernon Adams wouldn't be back. And actually, the official Montreal Alouettes Twitter sent out a tweet that said he was done for the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that was, again, one of those you could see Vernon Adams was in conversation with team officials or coaches on the sideline and obviously wanting to get back in there. It sure looked bad when he first came back in, but by the end of the game, I'm not sure if that was adrenaline or something else, but he seemed like himself at the end there. And it seems like our theme for the week is 50-50 balls, but what a catch by Eugene Lewis on the goal
Amazing.
line.
I don't even know how he got
just
that.
steal the football.
Yeah, it was like he put on the Superman cape and went up and got it. It was amazing.
That was an awesome finish, and what a strange overtime too. So you got to see an overtime game, and one that ended on quite unusual fashion with a turnover.
Yeah,
You know, meaning you only need to take your possession and kick the field goal. But you know, I guess good defenses can win the game in that way, and that is a great play to step up with. But yeah, what a game! I mean, it was such a dramatic win, and yet I still have to remind myself that Montreal won that game because Hamilton was looking maybe not dominant, but looking really good and really back to form of 2019, having all the weapons back, having Jeremiah Masoli at quarterback, and particularly Braylon Addison. Brandon Banks was back as well, had a real dud of a game. Maybe he's still shaking off injury, or maybe he just wasn't the focus. I think
he's really struggled this year in general.
He sure has.
He hasn't had, I don't know what the stats are, but I know he hasn't had a 100-yard game yet this year. And Braylon Addison comes in. He hasn't played all year, and he was pretty active. He had 7 catches, 73 yards, and, you know, he had that 2-point conversion there in the game. I knew he was pretty active, but then, you know, things kind of, you know, went downhill. And Jeremiah Masoli, I don't know if he's like, it wouldn't surprise me if they said, you know, next week when they put out the depth charts that, you know, or later this week, that David Watford is starting again. It wouldn't surprise me, but Jeremiah Masoli really has struggled in the times. I mean, he had a good first half or so, but he has struggled. It hasn't been the same like Dane Evans. That's for sure.
Yeah, there certainly was a decline in the second half. He did start really hot with that connection to Braylon Addison, but by the end of the game, that offense was stalling. I might give more of the credit to that Montreal defense, which is quite good, and I think maybe even a little underrated. But Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if Masoli can continue to pick it up. But I wonder if Brandon Banks finally shows this week as well. It seems like the appropriate game with Addison back in the lineup and with Braylon Addison probably getting a lot of extra attention coming up this week. Maybe that's the opportunity for Banks to find a spark as well.
Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully they're not hot this week since they play the Argos. So, okay. And our final game of the weekend was the Sunday night game. The Saturday night game, and it was the Saskatchewan Roughriders at Calgary.
Stampeders, yeah. For the second game of that doubleheader.
Yes, and it was Saskatchewan 17, Calgary 23. And this was a game that, you didn't know what you were getting with Calgary because Bo Levi Mitchell had been struggling, and he came out in this game and he was on fire. He looked like the old Bo. And we had a rookie who's having his first game, and Sean Bain had his first touchdown. He looked good in that first half. Cody Fajardo, we were talking earlier about, struggling a little bit, has more interceptions than touchdowns. Frustrated with receivers. I heard possibly he was frustrated with play calling a little bit based on what I saw. What do you think the answer is for the Saskatchewan here out?
Yeah, I don't know. That was a really disappointing loss. I had a bad feeling about that one. But I think, I don't know, it certainly wasn't as exciting as the game before with Montreal and Hamilton. I think
Yeah.
Calgary did just enough to win. I mean, Bo didn't light it up just throwing for 184 yards, but
No, he
with
didn't.
a couple of touchdowns. And I feel like a broken record saying this, but once again, the Calgary Stampeders have injuries to star players, Kamar Jordan and Josh Huff out for this game. And two guys who no one's heard of step up in their CFL debuts and light it up with Sean Bain and Malik Henry both having touchdowns. On the Saskatchewan side, I mean, I'm frustrated too. Not near as frustrated as Cody, it would seem, but I looked at a number of the stats after those comments to see receivers' catch rates on targets, and Kean Schaefer-Baker is really good about catching 2 out of 3 balls thrown his way. And Kyran Moore is pretty solid as well, although his passes are quite often short, in the 4 to 7 yard range, those quick slants.
And they did have that longer pass on a third down where I don't know if the receiver didn't run where he was supposed to, or he just overthrew him.
Another source of frustration too. And sometimes I understand that the Jason Moss offense is pretty complicated in that way, where both receiver and quarterback are reading and responding. So sometimes you get a miscommunication between receiver and quarterback in that way. But that last throw that was intercepted, Cody's only interception on the game, was really disappointing because Ricardo Lewis didn't even really seem to track the ball or to go up and make an effort. And contrast that to Eugene Lewis at the same stage of the game, with that throw to Lewis in the end zone, just catching that ball over 2 defenders like Superman. And that wasn't the only thing Cody was frustrated with, but I think that was the one that tipped it over for him, which is unfortunate. So yeah, they need to figure out that long passing game. I think they definitely took a step to addressing that. But the greater concern I have is with Cody Fajardo finally broke after his, almost godlike status in Saskatchewan. I mean, his win-loss record is incredible. nobody expected him to come in and be an elite quarterback in the CFL as he did in 2019 and has continued to be. He's been great this year as well. But to show that kind of frustration both with your receivers and with your coaches, it wasn't really a good look. I admire players who are willing to be themselves and be human, to show emotion. But this one will take some, he's going to have to repair that image a little bit. And Cody Fajardo couldn't remain perfect by perception forever. But I hope that he's able to respond to the pressure of being in the fishbowl that is Saskatchewan and bounce back to where he was before.
No, absolutely. Because you are a team. I know the quarterback is like, the spotlight's on him or everything, but you have to work together to get this back on track. And by pointing fingers and say, well, he didn't do this, he didn't do that, this is the problem. It doesn't, as you said, it doesn't put a good light on him. And maybe this is something he can learn from and go forward. But this is my only experience watching him this season, so I haven't seen him previously. So he's looked okay to me at times, but then it looks like he has been struggling. I don't know if that has to do with, as I said, the receivers, the play calling, no ability to get deep and that sort of thing. So we'll see how it goes. It'll be interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's right. I think the criticism of the receivers is fair. If I mean, the Roughriders and fans have been really excited by the emergence of receivers like Braden Lenius and Kian Schaefer-Baker. And, I think the team and the fans really like Kyron Moore as well. But if we're honest and we look around the top two duos from the teams from around the league, even with Shaq Evans in the lineup, Saskatchewan is not of the receiver quality that a lot of the teams in the league are, I think. And so there is some great emerging and developing talent there and ratio breaker talent among Canadian receivers. At the same time, you need 2 or 3, stars in your receiving core to really be competitive and compete with the best teams in this league, the Burnham and Whitehead and whatever else you've got. So I think it's a great move by the Riders, and hopefully it cheered Cody up and they can have a fresh start at practice.
There you go. So I wanted to mention AC Leonard had a couple sacks in this game, so he did his part. And as we said, Ian Schaefer-Baker had over 100 yards. He's been looking solid. He's been looking pretty good. So I know the story is that they're going to play a few more times here in the next few weeks, so that should be interesting to see how this goes and everything. So
yeah, that's right. And it'll be great for them to play at home. And yet, if they were to lose this game to the Calgary Stampeders at home, oh boy, things will not be pretty in Saskatchewan, with almost panic, I think, could ensue. So we'll see if they bounce back.
Right. We will see what happens. So we're going to head to our Week 10 preview. And I tell you what, I looked at the schedule Week 10, and I'm like, I'm confused. I don't know what's going on. I said, we have Toronto playing twice. We have Ottawa playing twice. What is going on? Please help me out with this. Tell me, what is the CFL doing to me? Is they just messing with me or what?
Oh boy. Yeah, I never want to say a bad thing about the CFL when we're trying to draw new fans and share what is a really great league and a great game. But scheduling, particularly this year, but usually also, we sometimes have midweek games. I think the COVID-19 pandemic caused all kinds of problems as well. We've even had some rescheduled games. But it's just a matter of trying to schedule 9 teams and, a
Mm-hmm.
9-team league. And so we have, 6 days between games on Wednesday or 5 Wednesday to Monday. 6 days to Tuesday, sorry. So we got a game Wednesday this week and a game Tuesday next week. And so, yes, as you said, Ottawa and Toronto both play twice this week,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little confusing just for the game scheduling. But once you enter the fantasy element, it becomes way more confusing. But we'll talk about that following these quick previews.
Yeah, so our first game is tomorrow night. That's why we recorded our show early. We have a Wednesday nighter. It's Ottawa, and they head into Toronto. Toronto had their week off, and I'm pretty excited about this game. Ottawa looked really good in their last game, and they got a win. They're not even at the bottom of the power rankings anymore, according to CFL.ca. And Toronto, they announced that they're going with McLeod Bethel Thompson again, which I'm pretty excited about that because he played pretty well. So, any particular thoughts about this game coming up tomorrow night?
Yeah, well, lots of great chatter about starting quarterback. Nick Arbuckle has been hampered by that hamstring injury, and yet, had he been healthy, it would have been a really tough decision, I think, as to which direction to go this week. But
Mhm.
McLeod will get the start, and you're right, he played an excellent game. On the Toronto roster this week, there are a ton of changes beyond the quarterback position. Eric Rogers is out this week. John White is out as well. And Darius Bladek is also out with injury. And yet there are some great returns that are exciting for the Argonauts as well. Big free agent sightings, Drake Nevis and Cordaro Law, will both play this week. And also Eli Menser and Shane Ray as well. So there is a huge airlift of the defensive linemen who were projected to be the starting defensive linemen for the Toronto Argos coming into the lineup this week. So that'll be really interesting to see. And Charleston Hughes, very strange, is third on this week's depth chart, which would put him behind 4 or 5 other defensive ends. So that
I
might
wonder
be
what
something
happened.
for conversation. I immediately thought, well, maybe he's banged up, and I went and checked the injury reports, and there was nothing. So maybe Chris Jones and Ryan Dinwiddie just want to try some of the other guys, and certainly they will run a rotation with all of the defensive linemen getting play. So maybe I'm reading too much into that, but I found that pretty peculiar to see
Yes, that
Hughes
does sound
3 guys deep.
interesting to say the least.
Some other personnel moves for that. For that game, the Argonauts released Vontae Diggs, middle linebacker, who was replacing Enoch Muamba, who had been a successful linebacker in this league with the Edmonton Elks. But he received a healthy dose of William Stanback in their last game. And it seems coaches weren't impressed with that, so he has been released. Jack Kassar starts at middle linebacker. This is a national linebacker, so as was backing up Enoch Muamba and was banged up in the last few weeks, but he'll get his debut as a starter, which will be really exciting. And he is a true middle linebacker with a 6'4", 240 build. So maybe they want to see a real run stopper in that middle position. And this has some ratio implications as well for the roster. So the Argonauts are now going to go with 4 American receivers. Chandler Worthy and Damien Jean-Pierre have played well enough to hold on to those starting positions in the receiving corps, along with Ricky Collins Jr. and DeVaris Daniels. So that's a good-looking receiving corps, and with Curly Gittens Jr. at the field side wideout as well. So lots of interesting roster moves for the Argonauts this week.
Yes,
But
be exciting.
that's one I won't call it a must win, but you don't want to give up a loss at home to what is still looked upon as a weak team in this league in the Ottawa Red Blacks. But I'm really excited about this one. Of course, I'm an Argonauts fan, but I was such a Red Blacks fan last week with the debut of Caleb Evans, and I'm really excited about this game tomorrow.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of fun. I think they're gonna, Chris Jones is going to give some different looks to Caleb Evans, and we will see how that goes. I feel pretty confident that Toronto will win this game, but Red Blacks. When you win a game, it does things for a team, that hasn't been winning. And, there's a lot to be said about momentum and that sort of thing. And, Toronto's had a week off. And when you win and you haven't won in a while, you want to get back right at it. So anything can happen in the CFL. So I'm pretty excited about this game to see what happens. So
should be a good one.
And then we're moving on to Friday night's game, and we have Edmonton at Winnipeg. Winnipeg at home has been pretty solid, and Edmonton has been struggling. And what's your take on this game?
Yeah, the Edmonton Elks seem to be a mess. Certainly coming off a loss to Ottawa. I'm not entirely sure if the problem goes beyond talent and football and whatever else. There are lots of rumors flying around, but I'll leave it at that. Talking about the on-field product, though, there are some really interesting stats I hunted out this week. Edmonton is first in the league in net offense allowed.
Wow.
Yeah. So why is this team losing? They are also first and second in rushing and passing yardage.
Doesn't seem like it adds up.
No, it doesn't.
I know they were up there in rushing yardage. I didn't realize they were up there in passing yardage too.
Yeah, and yards allowed, they are also the leaders in both of those categories, first or second. So I checked it out, and here's what sticks out. Takeaway giveaways. Edmonton has thrown a league high number of interceptions, 11, I think, and they have only forced 4 turnovers all season.
Wow.
So as well as that defense is playing in stopping yards gained, they are not taking the football away with fumble recoveries and interceptions. Again, that's 4 turnovers. They've forced Montreal, Winnipeg, Hamilton, BC, Saskatchewan, I think, have all forced over 20 turnovers. And so there's your mark. Edmonton needs
they're definitely not winning that turnover battle.
Stop turning the ball over and start taking the ball away.
Yeah, 4 is that's we're midway through the season here. You're not going to win many games with, your turnover differential in the positive like that. Giving the ball away more than you're taking it away. So, yeah, that's a big stat that stands out to me because that's a big thing with the defense is, yeah, if you're not winning that turnover battle and you're turning the ball over, I mean, you're the highest team in the league with giving the ball away and interceptions, and your defense, that says it all right there. And I think Winnipeg's going to handle them pretty well in this game. I don't have any reason to believe Edmonton can win this game. I, of course, could be wrong. I'd like to see a good game. I don't know what we're going to get, but it seems like Winnipeg's just going to be on a roll again. So we will see.
I think you have to assume, I guess the return of Trevor Harris could maybe provide the necessary spark. I'm not sure if he will return, but I think that might be possible given given his status practicing last week. We'll check on that tomorrow. But
And it almost doesn't seem fair a rookie quarterback going up against Winnipeg. These guys are awesome on defense. So at least they have a pretty good running game. So with Wilder Jr. out there, so you can say that they'll try to be balanced at least. And it's not a one-dimensional team. So, yeah, and we go into Saturday and we have the rematch of Calgary and Saskatchewan. This time in Saskatchewan. I don't know who we're going to see. As far as Bo Levi Mitchell, I've heard rumors of, a shoulder injury, and then he may need shoulder surgery before the end of the season or after the season, or they're not quite sure. So I don't know what we're going to get in this game. It the Cody Fajardo thing, and I guess we will see. I mean, this is a big game for, both teams. Calgary getting back into the playoff picture, and Saskatchewan not dropping too far out of the playoff picture. It is a big game, and I am excited about this one on Saturday night to see who shows up and who can overcome, some of the issues that they're having.
For sure, this exciting one. All eyes will be on Cody Fajardo after his post-game presser, and I'm not sure if Daquille Williams will play. I'm wondering if he has quarantine protocol to follow that might keep him out of this one. I actually haven't checked, but I'll look into that. But if he's on the field as well, there'll be a lot of eyes looking to that connection to see if those 50-50 balls can make a difference. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Saskatchewan for this one, for sure.
And we got a comment here. Real quick, we're talking about Cody Fajardo. We got a comment from Dan Bergen, who said Cody apologized to the team and fans today. So
there you go. Quick character rehabilitation. I mean,
right.
In my criticism earlier, Cody Fajardo has been an exemplary human being his entire time in the CFL. I think he's one of the most likable and always just a person who is really, gives great praise to his teammates, is humble, is accountable, all of those things. And that's why this is so newsworthy, how frustrated he was after that game. But great to hear he did go and make that apology to his teammates and fans as well. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. So then we head to our Monday games, which they're during the day, and I guess this is considered the Thanksgiving weekend for Canada in the CFL.
Ah, yes, it is, Bill. That's right. Canadian Thanksgiving weekend, where we will celebrate either Sunday or Monday. It's a little flexible, but there's always football as well, just like American Thanksgiving. So a couple of big games in the East Division on Monday.
Yeah. Got Ottawa at Montreal, and then we have Toronto at Hamilton. Both important games. I mean, Montreal wants to keep winning, so they're not too far out of the playoff picture. And then Toronto and Hamilton are playing for first place, basically. Toronto's a game up, so Hamilton wants to can't keep losing if they want to try to take that division. So it should be some good ones.
Those are going to be really exciting. It's hard to comment on these, of course, because Ottawa and Toronto both play before Monday.
It's kind of weird.
It is, but definitely two games really worth talking about too, because they're going to have big playoff implications in the East Division. And no matter what happens tomorrow between Ottawa and Toronto, I think you're going to have a couple exciting games here as I imagine, continue to see Caleb Evans at quarterback for Ottawa. to see what he can do in Montreal against that Montreal defense. That'll be another tough assignment, and also playing twice in 6 days as well for both Ottawa and Toronto as well will be tough.
Well, I guess the biggest thing about Ottawa that I noticed in their last game is they actually moved the ball on offense with regularity. It wasn't like, every other game throughout the season. They just couldn't move the ball offensively, whoever they had in the game. They had a few touchdowns here or there, but really they have struggled and they looked different offensively. So we don't know if they'll be able to keep that up, but it'll be interesting to see. And, Vernon Adams Jr., he's just one of those gunslingers where he's going to throw a few interceptions. It's just hard to imagine him going into a game where he's not, taking chances and he can overcome them with their defense. It'll be interesting to see how he does. We're at the midway point, a little bit over that, and we'll see how they continue to grow and that sort of thing.
That'll be interesting.
And Hamilton, we'll see who's starting at quarterback. We'll see if they're going to continue with Jeremiah Masoli and how quick they are to take him out of the game, if he starts struggling again. So yeah. And the big question for you is, will McLeod Bethel Thompson start on Monday?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great segue into our fantasy studs and duds, because there's a little bit to talk about CFL fantasy this week. But looking forward to that matchup, and definitely curious to see who's under center for the Toronto Argonauts against Hamilton on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will go ahead and we'll head to our fantasy studs and fantasy duds. And how did you do in fantasy this week? Were you killing it like you have been?
No, it was not a great week for me. I can't recall, but I did not do very well.
No, I didn't do
middle
very
of the road
well.
or worse, I would say.
Yeah. So yeah, I did pretty terrible last 2
I
weeks.
had lucky Whitehead, but I think everybody did. So
Yeah. So I have some fantasy studs this week. Some I mentioned, earlier on, and Kenny Lawler. He had a $6,000 price point, and he had 40.50 fantasy points.
Wow.
Pretty nice. And then I had Keon Schaefer-Baker again. He had 18.70 fantasy points. And the big stud for the price point I had was Sean Bain. He was the lowest price point you can have on CFL.CFA fantasy. He was 2,500 price point, and he had 16.8 fantasy points.
That was incredible. I don't know if anyone had Sean Bain, because even on the depth chart, he was below, I think, Malik Henry.
Okay.
And so it looked like, there were three new import receivers for Calgary in that game, and Sean Bain wasn't one of the two starters. But if anybody picked Sean Bain, good for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a steal of a pick this last week.
Good job. I am bad at picking those guys who's going to show up and that sort of thing. So fantasy duds, you have to go with the first one, Lucky Whitehead, 8,200 price point. Unfortunately, he got hurt in this one, but he had 0.10 fantasy points. So hurt a lot of people this week who had been going with him constantly. And then I got Shaq Cooper, the BC Lions running back. He had 7,900 price point. He had 1 fantasy point. And usually when your quarterback is your leading rusher, you're not doing so well. And he only has 9 yards. Your quarterback has 9 yards rushing, and he's your leading rusher. You're not doing very well. So And my last one is Darvin Adams, 8,500 price point, and he had 4.30 fantasy points. It was the Kenny Lawler show this past week. So, with him being out, it may be time for Adams to step up and do some damage here in fantasy.
Yeah, some of those values from 2019 are still really hanging on. Guys like Brandon Banks and DeVaris Daniels and Darvin Adams, priced really high, seemingly for their output this year, week after week. Whereas there are still deals to be had from guys who are emerging this year as major targets on their teams. So those are sometimes the studs. For looking ahead to this week, this is no surprise, but Brandon Banks is still priced at $11,800. Is so overinflated based on production.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know who would put him in the game in your team.
Yeah, and especially because he's not doing any special teams returns either. So, you have somebody like Ryan Davis in Ottawa. Actually, he's one of my duds too because of Devontae, because of Dedmon. But players like that who get a lot of returns. Chandler Worthy, I think this week could be a stud because of being both an offensive player and a return specialist. Those are players that you want to look at for good value.
Yeah, absolutely.
So explaining this week, because of these two teams, Toronto and Ottawa, playing twice, what CFL Fantasy has done is they've marked up the prices for those players, but you will get. So there's high risk and high reward here because you have the risk of injury, the risk of replacement by a healthy player returning from injury. And so somebody like McLeod Bethel Thompson, although incredible value, I think he's like 11,000 for both games or 13 or something. But there is no guarantee, and actually I would think maybe even doubtful that he starts the game on Monday. So that would be a real risk. And yet somebody like Chandler Worthy or Damien Jean-Pierre or
DJ Foster,
Ricky Collins Jr., DJ Foster actually could be a great pick because John White is out, so they won't.
Yeah, he's at a price point of 8,000
for 2 games and all by himself this week at running back for Toronto. I love that pick as a stud too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you might want to check Ottawa and Toronto players, but again, you're taking a big risk there, not knowing what's going to happen for the next game because those prices are inflated. But I like Caleb Evans too. That is a huge risk, but a quarterback for 2 games for 7,500, you could be spending an awful lot of points on impact offensive weapons in other areas.
And Caleb Evans really inflated the value of RJ Harris too, because you haven't heard much from him at all this year, and he picked it up a little bit. So it'll be interesting. That's for sure. They even have the Duke Williams in here already, and he's at a 9,000 price point.
I don't know if I'd touch that. I think he could have a game, but wow, some of these guys come back and they get slotted in at 3,000 or 4,000. But I guess the pundits.
And I'd stay away from Eric Rogers since he's not playing at least the first game. They have him at almost 13,000.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. So everybody, you could look up 3-minute warning on the CFL Fantasy League. And also we do the CFL Pick'em as well. You can join our leagues and join in the fun and the discussion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess we'll get ready and head out of here. Of course, we're 3-minute warning and Canadian Football League podcast. Bill Beer at Pigskin Punk 13 on Twitter. And this guy is Dallas Bergen at CFL Fans Toronto on Twitter. We're on the All Sports All Plays Network, and we're usually live Wednesdays 8 p.m. Eastern on all your pod catchers, YouTube, Facebook, and all that good stuff. So until next time, We will see you later.